What's the story, Morning Glory? What's the word, Hummingbird? Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and for joining me for this review of 90 Day Fiancé The Other Way, Season 6, Episode 13. There's something about JoJo. Let's get into James and Matalia because James is really annoying the hell out of me, and there's a few things I need to address with him. So, James and Matalia are on their way to the immigration office, I guess, to get things started with his visa. And as they're going there, there's like very heavy traffic, cars, buses, trucks everywhere. And they hear a bus honking. And the honking of the bus is kind of like a tune or a song or something. And so James is like, "What was that?" And Matalia tells him, "Oh, that's the bus honking. I told you the buses honk differently here than they do in America." So the reason why I'm bringing this scene up is because I thought James had been to Indonesia before. And so I would think that he would have been familiar with how the buses, the honking of the buses. So I was a little bit kind of thrown off by that because I really thought he had been in Indonesia before, that he had stayed in Indonesia for a little bit. So I thought he would have been familiar with the sound, but let's move on. So he tells Matalia that he's made the decision to not work with her family in the banana chip business. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't think that it's going to be able to garner enough income for him and Matalia. So he wants to do his own thing. He doesn't want to do the banana chip business. And he says to Matalia, or he says in his confessional, that him and Matalia had a jewelry making business at one point, so he may go back to that. But the banana chip business, he doesn't think it's going to be able to sustain him and Matalia, so he doesn't want to do it. So then they start talking about their dog Jojo, which they had to leave in America. And he's telling Matalia that Jojo may not be able to join them in Indonesia. Now, the reason why the dog Jojo didn't even come with them to Indonesia was because James says there was a rabies outbreak in Indonesia. So the dog couldn't come with them. But I guess that outbreak now has died down, and the dog still cannot join them in Indonesia because once the dog comes to Indonesia, he won't be able to return back to the United States. So poor Jojo would be stuck in Indonesia if they ever went back to the United States. And all of this to me, which it might be factual, the things that he's saying about the rabies outbreak and why the dog couldn't travel with them and why the dog still can't travel with them, all of these things that he's saying, I'm not doubting it at all, okay? Because I'm pretty sure everything that he's talking about can be verified. But it just seems like he's using all of this as a tactic to manipulate her into going back to the United States, because I've always believed that James had no intention of staying in Indonesia. I feel like he only came this time to placate her, just to, kind of go along to get along. But in the back of his mind, he has every intention of returning back to the United States. And I think he'll return back with or without her. So this whole thing about, well, the dog isn't going to be able to come join us, and because if he comes to Indonesia and if we have to go back, he won't be able to come back with us, so he's going to have to stay. So he's, because obviously Matalia loves her dog very, very, very much, and she wants to be reunited with her dog desperately, and so he's like using this as just a manipulation tool to try to get her back, to try to convince her to go back to the United States. That's how I see it. So later on, we see James and Matalia. It's at night, and they're eating Indonesia street food. And so they're having a conversation, and Matalia is asking James, how does he feel about Indonesia so far? He's been there a few weeks, and so she's checking the temperature to see, how are you feeling? How are things going? What is your opinion about living in Indonesia? He says he loves it. He says he loves the people there, but he doesn't really see himself staying there permanently. So finally, he is, because all of the little hints that he was dropping, I guess she really wasn't picking up, or she was definitely picking it up, but just ignoring it, picking it up and putting it back down. So he feels like he has to be a little bit more direct with her now. So he says to her, well, I don't see myself living here permanently. So he asked her if she would leave with him if he decided to go back. And Matalia says that it would have to be absolutely the last resort. They would have to have absolutely no choice other than to go back to America for her to consider moving back to the United States. So it has to be something very drastic that would pull her back to the United States. And so she was like, preferably no, I don't see myself going back. So he says in his confessional that she was very vague with her response, just like he was very vague with his response whenever she asks him about having kids. And I'm like, first of all, Matalia was not vague. She said preferably not. It would have to be like a last resort type of thing for me to go back to the United States. I don't think that's vague. I think she's making it very clear that she wants to stay in Indonesia. Him being vague about having a kid, he thinks he's being vague when he tells her, maybe, maybe not, maybe in the future, let's wait. He thinks he's being vague, but to me, it's crystal clear that he doesn't want to have any children. And it's crystal clear that she doesn't want to go back to the United States. So I don't understand. I understand they have this way of talking to each other with a lot of maybes, a lot of I don't knows, a lot of we'll see later what happens. No, y'all can play those games with each other if y'all want to, but to me, it's very crystal clear of what y'all are saying to each other. Because if you really wanted to have children, you would have been like, yeah, let's get started now. If she didn't want to stay in Indonesia, she would be like, yeah, I think I'm ready to go back. You know what I mean? So the maybes and the I don't knows and the what ifs and all of that, y'all are fooling each other, but y'all, ain't nobody fooling me. So James, he says in his confessional, he tells us that he's really leaning towards not having kids. Now, I think in the beginning of their marriage or the beginning of their relationship, when they discussed the possibility of having a family, I think he led her to believe that he was open to it. I don't think he was like seriously gung ho about, oh, I can't wait to be a dad. Let's already make a list of names. What room is going to be the nursery? I don't think he was that enthusiastic about it, but I don't think that he was very clear that he would prefer to not have kids than to have them. I think he left it open for her. He left that door open so that, she could build this hope that maybe one day he would really want to have kids with her. But as time went on, now that they're living in Indonesia and her health has improved and her parents are pressuring them, this whole kid issue is popping up more and more and more and more. So he feels like he has to be a little bit more direct. So in his confessional, he says, you know what, I'm really leaning towards not having kids. So he tells her that he asks her, would it if things would be if things were to go really bad in Indonesia, would she abandon him and Jojo? Once again, he's using the damn dog to manipulate her. He tells her, like, if things didn't really work out here and they went really south, and I had to go back to America, would you abandon me and JoJo? Like the way he phrased that was very, very manipulative, very gaslighting, making her feel like there'd be something wrong with her to not want to be with her husband and her beloved dog if things didn't work out in Indonesia. And of course, she was like, no, I don't want to abandon either one of you. And so he asks her, what is the age limit? The conversation was just like kind of jumping around everywhere, talking about living in Indonesia and talking about having kids. We're kind of like mixing it all together. So then he asked her, what is your age limit? What is the cutoff point for having kids with you? And she said that her age limit is 33. She's not going to try to have kids past the age of 33. So that's her cutoff point. And I'm thinking to myself, he's probably going to prolong this whole kid issue until she turned 33. And so then he's going to be like, well, I guess we can't have kids because you said, your limit was 33. So Matalia thinks that she may not even be able to have kids due to her thyroid. So even though her health has improved, she still has an issue with her thyroid, and that can affect her fertility. And of course, getting older will decrease her chances even more of being able to conceive. So she's got all these things working against her. So she would rather start sooner than later to have a child. So James says, well, what if I never see myself? He tells her this directly. He says, what if I never see myself having kids? And Matalia says, then what's the purpose of us being married? And then he tells her, well, aren't I enough for you? Once again, he's known since day one that this girl has wanted children. I think Matalia has been very clear with him that she's always wanted to be a mother. He's the one that's been really wishy-washy. So he's like, well, aren't I enough for you? Another sneaky manipulative tactic. And she's like, well, of course you're enough for me, but I wouldn't be complete without having a child. James. I think Matalia has never wavered in the things that she's wanted to do. She's made it clear that she wants to live in Indonesia. She's made it clear that she wants to be a mom. He's the one that's playing these mind games with her because he feels like it's easier to give in and then to take it back later instead of just, having to have a confrontation with her and telling her exactly how he feels upfront. So he'd rather just tell her, yeah, I'm open to having kids because he figures, well, later on, I'm going to weasel my way out of that and make it that we're not going to have any kids. Yeah, I'm open to living in Indonesia. In fact, let's go. And then he's going to start talking about, well, we can't sell the car and I'm not going to be able to make enough money and JoJo's not going to be able to come live with us. So he says yes. He takes the trip to Indonesia, just to appease her, and then in the back of his mind, he's trying to figure out ways to take it back, to take it all back. I think he's real sneaky. I think James is sneaky as hell. And I think that what they need to do, and I don't like when I advocate marriages, being broken and people divorcing. But Matalia, if having a child is this important to you, okay, I think you might need to uh, come up with a plan B as far as like maybe this situation with James isn't going to work out and you might need to look elsewhere. Okay. Um, I don't know. I don't know what to tell these people because they seem to be like on completely different pages as far as how they see their future. And I mean, completely different. He wants to live in America, no kids. She wants to live in Indonesia with a family. So I don't know. Someone's going to have to really, really sacrifice a whole lot of what they want if this marriage is going to work. Let's move on to Corona and Inky. So Inky takes Corona to the meeting. She's okay. So there's a meeting or support group of blacks living in Iceland, and she's gonna go to one of their meetings. So he takes her there, and he tells us that yes, there are people in Iceland who are racist or prejudiced or whatever, but him and his family and his friends, they don't really care that Corona's black, and race is not an issue for them. But Corona does want to meet other black people and be around other black people and just get that support system. So she goes to this meeting of, I think it was like about three of them that have lived in Iceland for a while. The one who's lived there the longest has been there for 30 years. So their number one advice to her is they tell her, you have to learn the language. You're going to have to learn the language. Don't play around about that. So then they talk about her career. So she talks about how she already has her degree in nursing and she wants to apply for midwifery school. And they tell her it's not going to be as easy as you think. Okay. It doesn't matter what your credentials are. If you went to the top of the top of the top of the schools in the United States, none of that matters, girl. What you should have done is if you already had a career in nursing, it would have been easier for you to transition that career in Iceland. But because you never worked as a nurse, I don't think she did. Because you didn't already have your career established, you're trying to still go to school here and then get a job. It's just going to be that much harder for you. So, Corona always wants to be the optimist and she thinks that everything is going to work out, that she's going to find a way to make it work out. And these three black people are looking at her like she has no clue. Like they're looking at her like this poor, poor girl. She has no idea what she's gotten herself into. So then she has a meeting with the program director of the midwifery school in Iceland. And she wants to just kind of gather some information on what is it going to take for her to get into midwifery school. So first, the lady tells her, you have to learn the language because all the classes are in Icelandic. And Corona is confused about this. And I'm thinking, this is the most basic thing that you would have already known before you even came to Iceland. Whether or not the school that you were going to apply to would be teaching their classes 100% in English because you don't know the language. So she tells us that when she was doing her research, she could have sworn that on the school's website, when she had everything translated to English, that it said that the classes were going to be taught in English. So I'm thinking to myself, girl, I pray to God that you did not use Google Translate. And if the website itself is in Icelandic, why would you think that the classes would be taught in English? I don't get it. I don't understand. Because if English is a universal language, and if they did teach their classes in English, I'm pretty sure that the website would either be all in English or it would be dual language, where you can read it in English and Icelandic so they can attract English speaking students. But if it's all in Icelandic, they have no intentions of attracting anybody that speaks in English. I don't understand how she missed that. This is the reason why I think Corona and Inky are a fake couple. Because nobody can be that stupid and that dense, especially somebody who got accepted into Penn State. There's no way that she's this stupid. So this has got to be all fake. Corona and Inky are not a real couple. So then she goes, well, will the interview to get into the school be in English? And the lady was like, no, it's going to be in Icelandic. And the lady was like, I've never had anybody ask me this question before. In other words, everybody knows that to do anything here in Iceland, you have to speak the language. No one has been dumb enough to ask, well, is anything going to be in English? So Corona thinks that, I feel like Corona thinks that because she got into Penn State, because she got into Penn, she feels like that's going to be so impressive, and she's just going to ease her way into everything else that she wants. They don't care about you going to Penn. They just care whether or not you speak the language. They could care less about you going to Penn. So she said that, so then she talked about the application, how to apply and all this and that. And the program director told her, well, for international students such as you've actually missed the application date. It was 2 weeks ago. Once again, Miss Penn, how did you miss that? How in the world did you miss the most basic of things when it comes to applying for a school, such as the damn deadline? Because she was like, oh, oh, it's past? Oh, 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 what? Girl, you got into Penn. Okay, you pride yourself in how, intellectual, intelligent, academic you are. How did you miss the deadline? How did that happen? So, girl, it's time to pack up. Okay, it is time to pack up and get your butt back to the United States of America. You got a man that's wishy-washy about whether or not he wants to marry you and spend the rest of his life with you. You can't figure out how to get into school over there, which means that you can't get your career started as a midwife, which is your passion, your dream, your purpose in life. So it's time to pack up and get back to the United States. And I don't think Penn should accept you back in because your reasoning skills, your analytical skills, and I'm beginning to even doubt your reading skills are just very lacking. Corona, extremely lacking. Like, I'm not understanding how you're missing the most basic of the basics. Let's move on to Joanne and Shawn. Okay, so Joanne and Shawn, they each talk to their children, individually. Joanne goes out with her boys, and to talk to kind of like talk to them more about their feelings on finding out that her and Shawn have been married for the past 2 years, and so she feels like maybe her boys will talk more freely with her outside the presence of Shawn. So the boys are still shook. They're shook as hell. They're still trying to like process everything, and they ask her, well, where are we going to live? And she says, well, Ireland is going to be the home base. Home base for who? Home base for who? How can Ireland be the home base for your children who grew up in New York? But anyway, she says, Ireland is going to be the home base. And so they're like, so we can't live in New York anymore? And she says, no, you'll always be able to live in New York because I'm going to keep my home in New York. That house will forever be your home. I'm not going to give up the house. So that will always be your house. So I'm thinking, like, why didn't she? I think her boys are asking her, who the hell's going to take care of us? If you're living here, who's taking care of us over there? So, but she never really said. Maybe she did say. I don't know. So she said, "Yeah, my home in New York will always be there. So you'll always have, a place to stay in New York, and I will just be traveling back and forth between Ireland and New York." And so they asked her, "Why didn't you tell us sooner that you were married?" And she said that she was just waiting for the right time, and the longer that she waited, the harder it got to tell them. So when she said that, that kind of made me feel like when her and Shawn got married, I think it was a spontaneous decision. I don't know if they were drunk. I don't know if they were just wrapped up in lust and love, and they just spontaneously decided, hey, let's just get married. I think that's what happened. I think that's the reason why it was so hard for her to tell her family, because it was a very a spur of the moment type of decision. And she didn't want to look stupid like this guy that I met online. I think they met on a dating app. This guy that I met through this dating app, I went to go see him, then we decided to get married, because it would have sounded really crazy. I think that's the reason. I don't think she was waiting for the right time. I think she was just ashamed and embarrassed that she made such a quick decision like that. Because I think she was just really wrapped up in the moment with him. It's like this whirlwind romance, and they were like wrapped up in each other, and they made this, very spontaneous decision to get married, and now they're hoping that everything else is going to fall in place. So the boys, okay, so they talk about where they would live, so on and so forth. And then she talks about how she's going to have to talk to their father as far as like if they did want to live in Ireland. And the boys are not really keen on living in Ireland. And so they're like, well, really, we just need more time to process everything. So then we see Shawn talking to Bella. So his daughter, Bella. So he thought that she would have been really happy about him and Joanne being married, because she's always wanted them to be married. And it's like, Shawn, are you dense? Just because the girl wanted y'all to be married doesn't mean that she was okay with the fact that y'all were already married during the time that she was wanting you to get married. It still affected her that her own dad kept this information from her for 2 whole years. So just because, she wanted it to happen doesn't mean that she was okay with you lying to her. So she was still upset about the fact that he had hidden this information for 2 years, but she likes Joanne. She's okay with Joanne moving in with them. So she's like, whatever, but the next time you lie to me like this, I'm not going to forgive you. And I believe Bella. I believe every single word that came out of that girl's mouth. I totally believe her. So Shawn, don't mess up again. Don't mess up again. This was a horrible, horrible, horrible idea. So I want to talk about Josh and Lily. Okay, Josh and Lily. There's a lot of tension between them because Lily is not feeling like, it's funny to me how she's coding. Um, how do I say this? Lily Lily wants to be touched. Okay, Lily wants some male attention from her man. She wants to get it on and pop in. So she's coding it as I don't feel loved. Okay, that's how she's coding it, but in reality, she's not satisfied. Okay, she needs things to happen. So he has planned something special for her. He surprises her with dance lessons. And I'm like, unless we're doing the cha 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 in bed, no, I'm not interested in dance lessons. He takes her for some damn dance lessons. And I'm like, Josh, the woman told you exactly what she wanted. She wants her back broken in like 3 different places. That she's not trying to do this, okay? The tango, the whatever. No, that's not what she wants. She wants you and her in a bed doing that kind of dancing. So I'm not understanding why he's not getting it. Whatever. She acted like she was enjoying it, but that's not what she wants, Josh. She told you exactly what she wanted. Okay? She told you exactly what she wanted. Okay? And so yeah, she wants to put that red bed into use. Okay? She wants to break the headboard. She wants to swing from the chandelier. She's not trying to do these dance steps. Anywho, that is my review. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. On your way out, please don't forget to rate the video if you like this content, subscribe to my channel, and I'll definitely talk to you later. Bye.